well, text message. I think I talked to him, yeah, a couple of days ago. Yes. And Barry's coming right back. And how many minutes do we have? Oh, not long, right?
I will be back at my seat in about 40 seconds.
You have a minute. You have a minute and 22 seconds.
All right, sounds good.
I'm gonna make it.
I'm gonna take myself off camera, but I'll just say when you can start, I'll just say start, and I'll start the recording.
Sounds good. Perfect.
Leon, is this light okay for you?
Oh, it's ready to start? Hello and welcome to another broadcast of All Things Black Politics here live. Yes, from Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Leon Rock, and this is a broadcast on Boston Black News. I'm glad to be here today to talk with an amazing young man, and I'm going to call him a young man who has, worked in neighborhoods and communities for many years, and you probably know him. And I'm going to reintroduce you to him if you don't know him, and that is my good brother, Barry Lawton. Yep, Barry Lawton. He has run for public office previously, and he has announced his campaign for a seat on the Boston City Council. Yep. Since the city councilor Frank Baker's announcement a few weeks ago that he won't be running for the 7th term inside City Hall, the field of District 3 candidates have begun to fill up. And by the way, Barry Lawton is not new to politics inside and outside of City Hall. He has worked as an aide to one-time city councilor Gareth Saunders. He has taught in the Boston public school system and has been an aide to, get this, State Representative Royal Bowling Jr. at the State House. He knows all of what happens in city and state government. I'm glad that he is running again for public office, and hopefully, just hopefully, some things will change in the city of Boston for the better. And if he becomes a city councilor, I'm sure that will occur. So without further ado, here he is, Barry. Yes, Barry Lawton. Welcome, Barry Lawton.
Thank you, Leon. I'm so appreciative of this opportunity to speak with you. I hope further on in the campaign, we can check again and see how we're doing. And first, let me say to you, you're an amazing brother. And we listen to you in my house, and we hear about your show out in the street. And it always is preference rich. You know what you heard on that show? You hear what they said on that show? So that's a really good source of information that the Black and brown communities have not had on a consistent basis. I know Boston Praise Radio has been one of the few entities that has hung in there. I know that it's very difficult for them to operate and they're on a shoestring, but you couldn't tell by the broadcast or by the content that comes out. And I would just have to say, before I get into the politics and all of that stuff, is that I learned this morning of Rodney Daley's passing.
Oh.
And yes, and Bill Wright called me and told me, Rodney, if you remember, Gang Peace.
Yes.
In the middle of the heat, I think I was teaching at the Jeremiah Burke at the time, and on the corner of Blue Hill and Quincy Street, that little spot, and there was a garden there. I remember for many years we were asking them to upkeep that garden, and then ultimately they tore the garden down. I think they removed it over to Marcella Park or something over there, and then they building up there named the Clarion.
Right,
of all the names you could have picked, we have the Michael Haynes Education Center, we have Leland Jackson Housing, and the Clarion.
So, go figure.
You know,
yes.
You know, hopefully we can straighten some of those things out. But I am so honored and blessed. I can tell you, I've been retired since 2015 after 24 years in the classroom, preceded by a number of years in the State House and in City Hall. So I thought I was done. And my children said, no, Dad, you're not done.
You're not done.
You have to finish the job. I sound like Biden. You have to finish the job. Let me finish the job.
Right.
Well, I'm running for opportunity to start the job. And
very good.
As you've talked about my experience in government, I'll go over some of it a little bit with you. I had the honor of serving Roy Bowling Jr. in 1978 in my senior year at Boston University. And so I've actually, on this redistricting controversy, the lines don't matter to me because I have served every part of this district, as we say in South Carolina, from the hooded to the tuda and beyond. So it doesn't matter. If you have a good representative, they should be looking forward to having an opportunity, if you've been redistricted out, to serve other communities. I serve the same way, just like I sing and perform the same way, whether I'm on Birdland in New York or whether I'm living at Care One. It's the same type of quality. I have that type of consistency. And then I had the honor of working for State Senator Diane Wilkerson, and also the legislative assistant for the Black Caucus. Back then it was just a caucus. Now it's a Black and Latino legislative caucus. And as you mentioned earlier, I had the honor of working on the city council. So my experience is there. I've been a member of my local civic association for over 41 years. And as I've been an educator for 24 years, but also I have a lot of connections with the community. Way back in the 1980s, I moved into the Dorchester Meeting House Hill area in February of 1982. And at that time, the district looked a lot different. And I've watched the changes grow. Instead of the community becoming closer, we've come more apart. Have different cultures. This is probably the most diverse district of the whole city. And so that's a challenge for any leader, to have to bring together voices from different political ilks, different cultures and all of this. So it is a greater challenge. So when people say, well, Black and brown people don't vote, well, we have a community that is a large immigrant population of people that aren't eligible to vote, of different cultures. So finding one medium. I think the one thing that I'm going to look forward to, if I am successful in serving in this council, is being that one that puts in the middle that says you cannot be entrenched on your side of the issue and just stay there, because that means there's no progress. There has to be movement on both. But I have to tell you, my upbringing, Leon, I was born on Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And my family is from the Columbia area and the lowlands, Beaufort, Richland, Allendale. That's my background. But Dorchester, Boston, is my first home, because growing up, we moved every 3 years or every 4 years. And I came to Boston University back in 1974. I was fortunate enough, God gave me good legs. And probably coming from when my father was stationed at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. I delivered the Washington Post and the Evening Star from my junior high to my senior year of high school. So that's probably where the leg strength. But I was honored to come up here and run on an athletic scholarship for Boston University. And it was my first home. And I love Boston and I love Dorchester. And it's just a blessing to be able to look at somebody and know them for 10 years or 20 years or 40 years or, 50 years, and watch them grow and develop. So it's just been a wonderful experience, and I've been so blessed. When I moved to Dorchester, many of the institutions and many of the stores were all white. And we saw this starting to change, but I had the opportunity because of my upbringing. I had no choice to pick my friends. I only had who was there on base. So it didn't matter what color, it didn't matter where they come from. It was a wonderful way. I know back those times I didn't feel that it was a good thing because I made friends and all of a sudden I have to move. But in retrospect, it has allowed me to be across cultures in politics, music, education, all of those things. So I think that I am very well equipped to serve everyone in this district, and I am committed to serving everyone in this district. I think one of the problems is that there are some districts or part of the district, and particularly this one, that have been underserved. And I'm going to change that when I come. Served on the directors of the Colonel Daniel Marr Boys and Girls Club. At the time I joined that board of directors in 1986, they had one Black member, and he was an incredible man. You might remember him. His name was Ron Burt. He has two sons that are now broadcasters, and he was a former running back for the Boston Patriots, now the New England Patriots. And he was the sole person on there. And what a representative he was. And I just have to salute some of those institutions like the Marr Club, the All Dorchester Sports League, the Dorchester Day Celebrations Committee for opening up and allowing me to come in very early and to bring others in. So I served, I've done my time and I've done my service. And, you know, service for me, the minute I realized what service was, I was like, I kind of like that, you know. And when my father was stationed at Lincoln University in the ROTC program back in the early 60s, I remember seeing the paperboy drive by and throw the papers. I said I'd do that. Well, I was small, had a tiny bike, I was 5, but I would trail him, and when he would miss throwing it on the porch, I would my bike and I would run and do it. That was service to me. So when we moved to Germany, I was 7 years old and living off the base. And I said, how can I serve? I saw my father get picked up in a car every morning and off to work. My mother always worked at all of our bases. And I said, what could I do? Well, I started serving Catholic Mass. And that was when the Mass was in Latin. It lasted for an hour. And I couldn't tell you what I was saying, Leon, but I passed that test and served for the 3rd Division base in Würzburg, Germany. And it was a wonderful experience. Used to get picked up early in the morning on Sundays and go serve on bases that had no dependents. And then come back, serve 9 o'clock Mass, go back out on the road. So I did that for 3 years. And I felt important that I was working too. And fortunately, when we were stationed back to the States, we were stationed to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And at that time in 1965, the Catholic Church had changed the Mass from Latin to English. And you know how sometimes old people are hard to change. When I got back, the priest on the base wanted to continue in Latin. And there weren't many altar boys who could do that. I was all the time. For 3 years, I served Mass for the 82nd Airborne Division. And it was a wonderful experience. there's a little dichotomy, because when you drove into Fayetteville, North Carolina on Highway 201, which we had back then, you were greeted by a welcoming Klan country. That stayed up until 1971. So it was a kind of mixed feeling of what's going there. North Carolina was very volatile as far as racially back in that time, but I was under the protection of the military base, and you know, it was quite an experience. Then my father was stationed to serve in Vietnam in 1969. At that time, we moved up to Northern Virginia and stayed in Allendale, in Fairfax County. And there I experienced, well, my sister and I were the only Black kids in a middle school. They called them intermediate schools back then, of 1,400. So I was forced to learn how to get along with people. And I did. I loved the experience. We went back to Fort Bragg after he served in Vietnam, and he was assigned to the Pentagon. And I moved down the road from where you are right now. He's lived in Prince George's County, Oxon Hill, Maryland. I'm a Clipper. And at that time, I started delivering papers, continuing my service. And back then, I didn't run track. I was a wrestler. And yeah, I really, honestly, I lettered in my sophomore year, my first year in high school. And it wasn't because I was a particularly great wrestler. It was like I could get on the scale with my clothes on and make weight. And so, you know, they just said, give them a uniform. But, you know, by my senior year, I decided that I wanted to be a state champion in something. And I knew it wasn't going to be wrestling. So I started running track in my senior year of high school, and ended up getting second in the state in Maryland. And ironically, I only applied to one school. I had scholarship offers to other schools, but I only applied to one school, Boston University. By the grace of God, I got in, which was amazing to me because I wasn't a brilliant student, but I did my work. And, you know, so, you know, all this is to say that it was important that my parents felt that it was important to raise somebody who was well-rounded in many different areas and be able to communicate with people in many different areas. Can I talk about my father and my mother a little bit? Because I wouldn't be
please do, because all this is important, because the bottom line is we want to know who you are. And the underpinnings of you. And then we want to get into the politics. Don't forget the politics, because we got some issues of health, education, housing, the critical mass issue of the Boston School Committee. How should that? I want to talk about all that and more. And we only got 45 more minutes, so please do.
Okay, so my father was born into a family of 8. My great grandparents were born into slavery in South Carolina. And his father, Asbury Lawton, who my son is named after, was a World War I veteran and fought in France, very distinguished. And when he came back about 10 years later, they gave the people that fought in the war a bonus. And he took that bonus and bought a few hundred acres in Allendale, South Carolina, and raised his family there. And that's where my father was brought up. He attended school at South Carolina State, and he is in the South Carolina State ROTC Hall of Fame. And he's always been impeccably dressed, very, very articulate. And ultimately, when he retired, he was a platoon leader in Korea, where he earned 3 Purple Hearts, Silver Star, and was very distinguished, and came back to the States. By the time he retired in 1981, he had received his doctorate from George Washington University in education. And when he retired, he went into my mom's business. right? He didn't know exactly what he wanted to do, but ultimately he became the founding dean of the School of Continuing Education at Hampton Institute. And when they multiplied their schools, they became Hampton University. And he was the founding dean there from the mid 80s until his passing in 2007. And his name is on that building, the Willie O. Lawton building on Hampton's campus. So very, very proud of him. He was a battalion commander in Vietnam of psychological warfare. They call it PSYOPs. Wow. And so, yeah, I couldn't mess around with my dad. My mom was from South Carolina, was from Columbia. She was a city girl, and she graduated from Allen College. Now it's Allen University. Any of those people that are familiar with that, and she worked all of her life, lived on Washington Street in Columbia, and on the other side of the tracks, so to speak. And I hope to talk about this a little later about our vocational, but she went to school, and it was partly vocational. They did academics in the morning, and they did a vocation in the afternoon. Unlike Madison Park, our vocational school, that has a 2-week cycle where I see a student for 2 weeks, and then I see him 2 weeks later. I think that we need to have, when she came out of school, she was typing 120 words per minute. So everywhere my dad was assigned, when she hit the ground, she was working. So this is what I talk about when I talk about service, that I was brought up in this service. Ultimately, she founded Lawton's Travel Service, Inc. in 1979 and grew it into a multi-million-dollar business with offices in Hampton, where headquarters is, Washington, D.C. for some of the federal agencies. We had an office in Hartford, Connecticut, Rockville Center in Long Island, and several military bases in the United States. And so she built that business up. So in my zealousness, I did not want to move back home to help the business. I said, Mom, let me start a branch up here in Boston. So in 1984, when I left service of government, I opened a branch of Lawton's Travel Service right down in Park Street Station. For the older folks, it used to be the Mug and Muffin was on the first floor, and I was on the third floor. And I stayed in business for about close to 5 years. And then I sold the business because I didn't have the capital. When companies have to do business with government entities, sometimes they have to float that money. And then because you have to pay for your airline tickets and all of that stuff at the end of the week. So I found that it was cutting into the profit margin, and I thought it be better to sell it and go on to something else, which was politics, which was my first run for office in 1988. So I've been in business, I've done that stuff, and then I went into teaching because I felt that I could have the greatest impact by helping young people and sharing my experiences with them. If you run into any of my students, they said, Mr. Lawton was tough. And I had a teacher like that was tough, that I really didn't like when I was there, but grew to appreciate and understand, with the maturity. So I went into teaching. My first teaching assignment was at the Jeremiah Burke under Albie Holland, and a wonderful woman, Kathleen, I cannot remember her name, but she was my first vice principal, and they loved me. They offered me a contract in another part of the city in Charlestown, and I taught at the Edwards Middle School. Then I taught at the Amana Barnes Middle School, and then I went back to work in the State House with State Senator Diane Wilkerson when she was coming in, and she needed that type of support, and I came in and worked for her. Then I went, didn't like middle school that much, went back to work in the State House and got my first high school assignment at Dorchester High School back in 1995, which was wonderful. It was a rough period, as you know, back then.
Yes, I do.
But I had the opportunity, I think the following year, the Jeremiah Burke lost its accreditation. And I had a choice of going to teach at Boston Latin, or the Jeremiah Burke. I chose the Jeremiah Burke because I felt that they could benefit more from my education. We got our accreditation back in 3 years. And just like a military brat, I moved to East Boston High, and the Madison Park.
let me move on right now and talk politics now, because you're running for District 3. Tell me about District 3. What is District 3? What are the neighborhoods that are included in District 3? And why are you running for city council now versus state rep?
Well, I'm running for city council now because we have problems in the city. Yes, we have problems in the state, but I've seen the breakdown of democracy in the city of Boston. And I think I can help. I'm inexperienced in bringing people together, and I think that's what our district needs. This district, by the way, is one of the most underrepresented districts in the city and the Commonwealth. We had our state representatives, we had 3 state representatives leave early. So during those times that they left early, for each year after, we were underrepresented. But this district is really a challenging district. The current one that they have that's up in the air, it includes Dorchester, South Boston, South End, and Roxbury. You couldn't find a more diverse combination than those 2 and put them into one district. I believe that I've had the ability to work with people from all different types, and this is what our district looks like now. So it extends from now, or we don't know exactly what the district, from the south end around Albany Street, that area, all the way up to New Market. It goes all the way, extends all the way up to just shy of Gallivan Boulevard. So it's a long stretch. It reaches over and picks up a little piece of Roxbury down by the Orchard Gardens area at Vine Street. And then it goes over to South Boston. And so it's a wide ranging district. And you know, when you don't have power, that stuff ends up happening.
Is it in South Boston, is it the total city? Is it the total?
It's a piece of it. We have a piece of these communities. Yes, it's got the it's got the Old Colony housing over to the left. When you pull off of that circle, and then it takes in Harbor Point, the UMass area, and all that. So it's kind of like the southern side of the district. So we really don't know what's going to happen with it, Leon, but it's a wide-ranging different, many neighborhoods, many cultures, a wide range of incomes, you know, as you can go tell from the south end all the way up to Dorchester. So it's a very, very diverse district. And I've been fortunate.
Why do you want to be the city councilor for that district? That Dorchester, South Boston, South End, Roxbury, essentially a melting pot in some ways.
Yes.
To what Boston looks like. Why do you want to be the city councilor for that district?
Well, I'm trying to address some problems, and that's one, the disconnect between the leadership and the people. And I think that has grown over the time. So I'm running for the Boston City Council to represent District 3. Number one, to listen to the people and serve its residents with vigor and a new vision to harness our diversity and galvanize our voice in City Hall. Other districts have challenges. Once I know, as a city councilor going in representing District 3, I know I am in competition with 12 other councilors to bring back resources. I'm not one of those that likes to cut political deals. The proof is in the pudding. My service record in this district is easily transferable from the state rep to the district because it's a way of operating and communicating with people. And you know, a lot of people that have been elected, once they are elected, you really don't see them again. They don't campaign again. I'm a boots on the ground person. I love going in and visiting a lot of the businesses that I use and utilize. They have seen me knocking on their doors. I've knocked on this area, these district doors, 4 separate times. And I've done a lot of work for other candidates over the years. So people are very familiar with me. I would like to come to that city council and bring some civility, because as you see right now, it's descended. to a state that is that we've never seen before. Even during the busing period, we didn't have this type of situation where counselors were calling each other's names and that type of decorum. There's enough of that on both sides. We need to come together and understand, how do we allow our people that live in this district to stay in this district? How do we provide them with affordable housing? How do we address quality of life issues? One of the issues that I've addressed quality of life is public safety, transportation safety. I've spent the last 20 years trying to get crosswalks in certain places where they weren't, trying to get the pedestrian sticks to slow down some of this traffic. That impacts everybody, no matter who you are. So that's been important to me. Senior care, as you know, you can look in the mirror, we're getting older, and that elderly population is growing. They are afraid, some of them, to come out of their house because they watch the news. They are afraid that nobody is fighting for them because they haven't seen them. Senior care is very important. And I understand this because I sing in assisted living buildings. We need to pay more attention to them. They are the people that have got us to this point. We need not to forget them. So that's very important to me. As I told you before, I was in business. So I understand what it takes to have a business and to run a business. We need to support our businesses. I do, but you know, when you have large institutions like Walgreens or these Stop and Shop or these long things, our small little grocers can't really compete with that, and we have to continue to support with them. Re-entry, as you know, one of the areas that I had to work up from the beginning of working in the legislature, probably 30% of my dealings was dealing with people that were locked up, incarcerated, who felt that once they were in there, somebody threw the key away. That wasn't the way that Roy Bowling Jr. or Diane Wilkerson or Gareth Saunders, that's how they looked at it. They said, go do something about it. And so I'm looking for a strong reentry program. I'll just tell you quickly, Leon, one of the things I did when I became Assistant Director of Personnel for Governor Michael Dukakis, I kind of had a gold card to go wherever I wanted. I visited every prison, including Framingham State Prison, to go there and to see what the conditions were and to see how all these people and parents and families were complaining about the conditions there. You can hear about them, but it's better when you see them. On housing, people often ask me out there, are you for rent control or you're not for rent control? I said, well, first of all, we have to recognize the reality that rent is out of control. So that just suggests that there need to be some clamps put on it. So for the new housing that's built, it has to be affordable. It has to be affordable. Our community, as you know, has been an open range for developers outside of the community to come in and make more money. Now, if you understand how a business builds up, you sell one house, use the capital for that one to buy another one, and then another one, and then another one. We have not participated in this type of development for people to gain their homes. They build them and we're paying market prices. We have a lot of absentee landlords in our district that are not concerned with the families that live in their homes, but they get as much money as they can out of it. This has driven a lot of people back into their parent homes, back into the neighborhood, and they bring their cars. So we exacerbate the traffic problem, which is one of the original problems that I wanted to deal with. Substance abuse. Substance abuse leads to many problems. And there are many people in this country, in this community, in this state that are dying because they have not gotten the treatment. Some of that abuse leads to them getting into the criminal justice system, and they are lost. People that have been once productive are no longer productive. We need to reach back, not forget them, and bring them back and understand that they have to have a place to live as well. And then, of course, the environment. In our area, we have the terminals for the buses and all of that. Our air and our conditions are worse than other parts of the city. I would like to look into new ways to preserve our community. If you look at the paving, I did not realize it, but in my research, there is porous paving where the water doesn't have to drain off the street and go into a sewer. It can go right through the pavement or right through the cement and into the ground level. A lot of the water waste that we have in our community is from Old pipes. Some of our houses are 100 years old, leaky pipes, those types of things. They are not going to change things around in a major way, but we have to chip away at all of these problems. Some of the issues that I'm interested in is an elected school committee. Out of the 351 cities and towns, we are the only one that does not have an elected school committee. For the past 30 years, it's basically been run out of the executive branch. The people have not had a say in what goes on. Additionally, not having an elected school committee eliminates the proving ground for young people that would like to get into politics, to have an opportunity to serve, to jump from a community person right up to the city council. You have to sell off a little bit of your soul in order to get elected. I've never done that, which is probably why I might not have been elected. We need to have reliable transportation. You know, transportation in the Black community is running to the bus stop. If you look at the gap on the MBTA, look on the gap on the MBTA map, that gap where there's a gap, that's Roxbury, that's Dorchester. And I know that in the past decade, they put in the purple line. Those tracks were there 30 years ago. They could have put in the purple line 30 years ago. We need to have modern transportation. The developers in the Dudley area, it's going to be hard to get development if you don't have rapid transit right there. People don't like to get on buses to do that. And so to attract people and businesses from outside, we have to have the proper infrastructure and reliable transportation. I'm for civil rights for all Bostonians. I don't care what you look like. I don't care what your culture is. We all want the same things. We want a clean space. We want a safe neighborhood. We want our children to be educated. We want not to be judged on who we are and what our affiliation or our culture is. And law enforcement. One of the things that was a tradition for me, whenever we had a captain in C11 come in, I would go and sit down with that captain, who would be surprised, like, why are you here? Who are you and why are you here? Because I want to help you help us. And so I've seen these people, these new captains, and ironically, we've never had a woman captain in that district. We've never had a person of color. I do not believe we have a Black precinct captain or a woman precinct captain in the city. And that's just not right. It just does not match. So I believe that you must have a leader, a representative that's experienced, but not just experienced by the jobs and the appointments and all those things, by having a consistent concern of the community, involvement in the community, and the people that can make the community better, to have a relationship with them. You got to say something, Leon, because I can go a mile a minute.
You have covered everything that I wanted to talk about. Let me drill down to a topic that you mentioned. One, when you were talking, you had mentioned the fact that I should have written it down, but I'm going to ask you to reiterate it. And that is that you're not you mentioned something like you don't necessarily make deals. You don't make deals or something of that type. Am I correct?
Well, I think in every time that I've run in a race, I've had to run against a political machine. I've been to David every time I've run, and I came very close to beating a machine by 41 votes in 2010 to get to the legislature. But this is one of the reasons why young people are discouraged from running, because they cannot compete with political machines. And because our voting turnout is so low, we can be easily manipulated by external forces. And I think that's what's been happening. It's been very difficult and it's very discouraging to continue to run. But I'm not discouraged. I'm scarred, I'm beaten, but I am still here and I'm still standing and I'm still interested in serving and looking for the opportunity to serve people. Let me also say that one of the other things that I do, it's not about talk. In 1998, I filed 11 pieces of legislation. Several of those passed, having to do with transportation. But I also filed
state or city?
This state. When I was back in 1998, Charlotte Golo Ritchie was our state representative. I filed legislation to reduce the sentences of incarcerated individuals that did not commit sexual or violent crimes. that they getting substance abuse treatment, getting additional education, vocational education, that their sentence should be reduced. We have to help these people coming back out here, or they're going to get back into the same things and the same thing that they were doing before. So I filed that piece of legislation. As a teacher, I knew the number one impediment to learning is absenteeism. We average maybe 20% a day in some of the schools that I taught. I filed a piece of legislation to give free MBTA, unlimited MBTA passes during the summer for students that met certain attendance requirements. This was intended for the parents to get them out to school, because if you're not in school, that you can't learn. I filed legislation to create a rapid transit city, to go right up through a system, to go right up through the Black community. The transportation system was better 90 years ago, Leon. There were trolleys going from Dudley to Uplands Corner. You could get around. And when the composition of that neighborhood changed, that infrastructure was allowed to decline. So I actually filed legislation.
Obliviated, correct? It was.
I'm sorry?
It was.
It really was.
It was.
If you pull up some of that asphalt, you will find the tracks getting there. So
that's right.
When the white population left that area, the infrastructure, the business structure, the transportation structure, it was all a result of redlining. And Boston has to repair the damage that it has done to people that have lived there. And I think I'm very optimistic now that some people are opening their eyes to it. But again, some think I didn't have anything to do with it. I'm not responsible for it. I don't have to repair it. I believe that a mistake is not a mistake until you refuse to correct it. So I'm running to correct some of those.
Talk about corrections now. What you plan to do. We know what the problem is, and you've articulated the problem in clear and unequivocal terms. But what are the solutions? So let's go to education for a moment, and then let's go to housing. For education, you've indicated that there needs to be an elected school board. The mayor has essentially negated what the people have voted for. The people voted for in a referendum to have a school committee that is fully elected by the people. She is pretty much, and this is not to insult the mayor, this is just to say the mayor has made a decision. She wants a hybrid, even though the city council supported what the people said. What do you say needs to be done? There is one thing, and the city council saying another, and the people saying another. Where do you stand in that, in all of that, and how do you build consensus?
Well, first of all, she's no longer supporting, my understanding is she's no longer supporting a hybrid system. And so it's back to the way that it was. Now, I believe Michelle is a very, very competent person. Michelle, I believe, came here in 2009. So I think a lot of, she doesn't know a lot of what she doesn't know. And, you know, every mayor wants to come in and say, I have a new way, I'm going to do it different. I want to have a chance to run and change these schools. And I think that's what her attitude is. She knows the importance of education. She's expressed it, and I believe it. But, you know, I'll just give you an analogy. You know that show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And when there's a contestant there and they're stumped, who is always right? The people, right? You call the audience, the people. And I think that people can be right on this case. They're the people that have to bear the consequences of a poor school system, which is why we have seen a mass exodus into the private schools, into the charter schools. And they're leaving a shell within the Boston public schools. So I think the people need to have a voice here. An appointed school committee has not worked for us. And why continue to do something that's not working for us? And why not listen to people? So I think that's important. I think high school needs to be fun, Leon. As a former coach in there, our athletic program, look, you have communities of color. There's one thing that you know you have. You got some athletes in there. And we are not producing athletes that are going to school on scholarship because we have poor facilities. I remember practicing track in the basement of Madison Park while we couldn't get into the Reggie Lewis track, which was right next to us, which was owned by the state. We didn't even have that access. So we don't even have the facilities. And you know that athletics also builds character. We have coaches that can lose, that might have a team, 3 people, they are still getting paid as coaches. I think that we need to give the athletic the power to hire coaches that are experienced instead of it ended up being a patronage job, for the principal. So I think that high school needs to be fun. I believe that food needs to be great because growing people love to eat. If you have good food, they're coming to school, right? You have a salad bar, you have healthy food that you can give to them. These are the types of concerns that we and community leaders have to say, we are demanding these things because these people have it. If you go up to a high school in the suburbs, it looks like a college campus. You come here, it's a concrete jungle. And I think it's time for us to change that and find some innovative ways to educate our young people outside of the brick walls.
Doesn't it rely, going back to the school committee, again, what will you do to make it different from the current city council voting for a elected school committee and the mayor saying hybrid? And by the way, you said that she is, backing off of the hybrid. I haven't heard that yet. But the bottom line is that what is the consensus that you can build to actually get it moving?
Well, actually,
as an elected body,
many city councilors support it, and every which is, but it was a non-binding referendum, and so we got an idea how many people wanted to have that system, but it wasn't binding. It didn't compel. I'll join the voices on the city council that support an elected official. There's just no other alternative. The last 30 years has shown what it could do. I think it's time now to see what the people can do. And on another issue too, democracy is broken. It's broken in Boston. It's been broken for a while. I work with the group, and I'm sure you're familiar with the New Democracy Coalition. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, the group called Part of the Solution. We registered over 20,000 voters to get on the rolls to see them eliminated because of the new rules that said, well, if you haven't voted this many times, you're dropped off the list. So a lot of that work was erased. One of the things that we were trying to do is to get a public hearing on changing the name of Faneuil Hall. For me, you have your choice. If we have a referendum and people say we want to change the name, we've done data that says over 70% of people would like to have that name changed. Probably over 90% think we should have a right to a hearing. We have not been able to have a public hearing. So when you have an august body like the city council, there has been collusion among Black and white city councilors to do work avoidance on race. And this is why I think all of that work avoidance is coming back and hunting us now. If you talk about race and you want to have a political career, be careful. Don't commit to one side, don't commit to other side. Let's both agree not to talk about race and get on about our business. And they've been able to do that. Everybody's entitled to a public hearing. Anybody that's denied by the city council needs to look at their city councilor and say, why not? This is one of the areas that I had with Frank. I didn't agree with Frank on a lot of stuff, but I always maintained respect for him. He maintained respect for me. He returned my phone calls. And that's why people, so I could maintain that access. That no longer works anymore. I've been snake bit by politicians that I've had faith in, I've helped, and they don't know me anymore, or they avoid me. I think it's time to have people that you can trust.
Housing. You mentioned the crisis in housing. Everybody knows about it in Boston. The average housing for is $2,500 for a 2-bedroom apartment in Boston.
I know.
The 7% the value of a resident, Black resident, in terms of their net wealth is $7 compared to $250,000 for a white Boston resident. There's an economic divide, clearly, and it has everything to do with jobs and housing. Jobs in housing. Jobs in housing. Obviously, connected to that is education.
But leadership is important. Leadership is important, and that's what we have lacked.
But
right?
Can I go to the housing issue just for a second, if you don't mind, because we only got 3 minutes left.
Are you kidding?
3 minutes. So in the housing arena, are you in support of mixed income housing? As an example, from what I understand, in public housing in Boston, everything's turning mixed income. And it turning mixed income, there's a level of disconnect or decentralization of low-income housing that was it for many residents of Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan, was that you wanted housing. There's one place that you knew you could get housing, and that is in public housing. But if you create mixed income housing, then those low income units are no longer in existence. Talk to me about mixed income housing and your position.
I think mixed income housing has to remain mixed income housing, but I think there needs to be more affordable in those projects. Now, we've seen cities like Cambridge get a greater commitment from the developers. Over here, we'll give you a little bit here, and it sounds good. It's market development. These things turn into market rate eventually, and I believe they eventually will, because there's nobody minding the store. On those projects, there needs to be an increase in the percentage of housing that's affordable in these projects. And these projects are going up everywhere. We still have, in our district, we have the coastline. We don't want a repeat of the seaport, where the housing is not affordable from the get-go. And so we have a whole part of the coastline, which is part of this district, where I will say anything that goes up here is going to have people that have lived here be able to move into that place. Because right now, if you can't stabilize a community, you're vulnerable to a lot of different things.
Very good. Thank you, Barry Lawton. This is the man that wants to be your representative out of the city of Boston's District 3 in Boston City Council. We thank you so much for joining in the conversation. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, I have an email, lawtonfordistrict3@gmail.com. My phone number, because I like to be personal about it, 617-794-9855. I'd like to talk to constituents. Our website is up and running. We've only been running about 2 weeks in this campaign. So we're up and running, and I know people are asking, where are you? Where are you? I can't be everywhere, but I will be eventually. And we've been knocking on doors for about 2 weeks. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thank Boston Praise Radio for doing what they do.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Barry Lawton, and thank you for joining All Things Black Politics here, live from, well, Boston right now, but from Washington.
Vicariously, DC, Chocolate City.
And we